I need you to understand something before I tell you this story. I'm not the kind of woman who goes through phones. I never was. I trusted my husband completely for 8 years of marriage. 8 bloody years. But last Tuesday at 3:47 in the morning, I woke up to use the bathroom, and when I came back to bed, his phone was buzzing on the nightstand. The screen lit up the whole room. And there, in bright white letters against the darkness, was a name that made my heart stop. Not another woman's name. Not some random contact. My brother's name. Jake. Now, you're probably thinking, so what? Brothers-in-law text each other all the time, right? But here's the thing that made my blood run cold. My husband Marcus and my brother Jake absolutely despised each other. They hadn't spoken in 3 years. Not since Jake accused Marcus of being a gold digger at our wedding reception, drunk as a skunk, screaming it in front of everyone. Marcus swore he'd never speak to him again. I'd spent 3 years being the bridge between them, the mediator, the peacekeeper. Family dinners were a nightmare. I had to choose between inviting Marcus or Jake to every event. They wouldn't even be in the same room together. So, why the hell was Jake texting my husband at 3:45 in the morning? I wish I'd never looked. I wish I'd rolled over, gone back to sleep, and stayed in my perfect, ignorant little life. Because what I found didn't just destroy my marriage. It destroyed everything I thought I knew about my entire family. Let me take you back to the beginning so you understand just how spectacularly my world fell apart. Marcus and I met at a tech conference in Manchester 6 years ago. I was 27, working as a project manager for a startup that was going absolutely nowhere. He was this gorgeous, confident software engineer who made me laugh until wine came out of my nose at the networking mixer. We were inseparable from that first night. He wasn't rich, but he was stable, kind, and he looked at me like I was the only woman in the universe. My family loved him. Well, almost all of them. My mom thought he was a dream. My dad shook his hand so hard I thought he'd break it, relieved that his daughter had finally found someone sensible. Even my younger sister Emma was charmed by him. But Jake? Jake hated him from day one. My brother was always the protective type. He was older than me by 4 years, and after our dad died when I was 19, Jake sort of took over that role. Too much, honestly. He vetted every boyfriend I ever had like he was MI5. He'd run background checks, stalk their social media, interrogate them about their intentions. It was suffocating, but I knew it came from love. Jake had his own demons. He'd been through a nasty divorce 2 years before I met Marcus, and his ex-wife had absolutely cleaned him out. Took the house, the car, even his bloody dog. He'd become cynical about relationships, especially about men who seemed too perfect. When I introduced him to Marcus, Jake's face went cold. He pulled me aside that same evening and told me Marcus was hiding something. Said he could tell by the way Marcus avoided certain questions, the way he was too polished, too rehearsed. I thought Jake was being paranoid, projecting his own failed marriage onto mine. The wedding was beautiful. I wore my mom's dress, altered to fit. Marcus cried when I walked down the aisle. Everything was perfect until the reception. Jake got absolutely bladdered on whiskey and started shouting during the toasts. Called Marcus a gold digger, said he was only with me for my potential inheritance from Dad's life insurance. It was horrifying. Marcus turned red, then white. Security had to escort Jake out while he screamed that I'd regret this, that Marcus would show his true colors eventually. I didn't speak to Jake for 6 months after that. When we finally reconciled, it was only because Mum begged us. But Marcus refused to be in the same room as him. Ever. It created this permanent fracture in our family. Christmas became a logistics nightmare. Birthdays were split into separate celebrations. I was constantly exhausted from managing everyone's feelings. But Marcus and we were solid. We moved into a lovely flat in South London. We both got promotions. We talked about starting a family. We had Friday date nights and Sunday morning lions. We were happy. Or at least I thought we were. Then came that Tuesday morning. I picked up Marcus's phone. My hands were shaking. The message preview said, "Same time tomorrow. Don't forget the documents." Documents? What bloody documents? I knew his passcode. He'd never hidden it from me. We used each other's phones all the time. It was 7-2-9-4, our anniversary. I unlocked it, my heart hammering so hard I thought I'd wake him up. The messages between Marcus and Jake went back months. Months. I scrolled up, my hands trembling, reading message after message after message. They weren't fighting. They weren't arguing. They were planning something, coordinating something. There were references to bank accounts, transfers, property deeds. One message from Jake said, "Make sure she doesn't suspect anything. Keep everything normal." Marcus replied, "She trusts me completely. It'll be fine." I thought I was going to be sick. I ran to the bathroom and dry heaved over the toilet. When I came back, Marcus was still sleeping, his face peaceful, his breathing steady. This man I'd loved for 6 years. This man I'd defended against my own brother. This man I'd chosen over my family's doubts. What the hell was he doing with Jake? And why were they hiding it from me? I spent the next week pretending everything was normal, smiling at Marcus over breakfast, kissing him goodbye when he left for work. But inside I was dying, because I knew that whatever I was about to discover would change my life forever. I became someone I didn't recognize. I started checking Marcus's phone every chance I got. When he was in the shower, when he went for his morning run, when he fell asleep before me, I went through his emails, his browser history, his app notifications. I was possessed, obsessed, sick with the need to know what was happening. The messages between him and Jake were careful, coded. They never said anything explicitly incriminating, but the pattern was clear. They were meeting regularly, every Tuesday and Thursday for the past 4 months. The location was always the same, the usual spot. They talked about moving things forward, about timing, about keeping it quiet until everything was ready. I thought maybe they were planning some kind of business venture. Maybe they'd secretly reconciled and were trying to surprise me with a joint investment or something. I know how mental that sounds now, but I was desperate for it to be innocent. I loved Marcus. I didn't want him to be the villain. But then I found the bank statements. Marcus had always handled our finances. I worked full-time, contributed to our joint account, but he paid the bills, managed the savings, dealt with the boring stuff. I trusted him. Why wouldn't I? But when I logged into our joint account, the one we used for household expenses for our future house deposit, I found something that made my blood run cold. £50,000 had been transferred out over the past 3 months. Small amounts at first. 2,000 here, 3,000 there. Then larger chunks. 10,000. 15,000. The transfers were labeled as investments and savings allocations, but they weren't going into any account I recognized. They were going to an account number I'd never seen before. I felt like the floor had collapsed beneath me. £50,000. That was our entire savings. Our deposit for a house. Our security. Gone. I confronted Marcus that night. I couldn't hold it in anymore. He froze when he saw them. His face went through about 5 different emotions in 3 seconds. Shock, fear, anger. Then this horrible, practiced calm. I asked him where the money went. He told me it was a surprise, that he was investing it for our future. He said he'd been working with a financial advisor to grow our savings, to make sure we could afford the house we really wanted, not just the one we could scrape together a deposit for. He said he wanted to tell me when everything was finalized, when he could surprise me with the news that we'd doubled our money. It sounded plausible. It sounded exactly like something Marcus would do, romantic, ambitious, slightly controlling but well-intentioned. But I didn't believe him. I asked him why he was meeting with Jake. His face changed again. This time, it was pure panic. He asked me how I knew about that. I told him I'd seen the messages. He went silent for a long moment, then sat down across from me. He told me that Jake had actually apologized months ago, that they'd secretly reconciled because Jake felt terrible about the wedding and wanted to make amends. He said they'd been meeting to work on a business opportunity together, something that could benefit all of us. He said he didn't tell me because he wanted to wait until it was certain, until he could present it as a done deal and heal the family rift in one big gesture. God, he was good. He was so bloody good at lying. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe him so badly. But something in my gut was screaming that this was all wrong. I told him I wanted to see proof. I wanted to see the investment account, the financial advisor's details, everything. He said he'd show me everything that weekend, that the documents were at his office, and he'd bring them home on Friday. Friday came. He brought home nothing. He said there'd been a delay, that the advisor was finalizing some paperwork. He kissed my forehead and told me not to worry. He took me out to dinner, held my hand across the table, told me how much he loved me. We came home and made love, and I cried afterward, and he thought it was because I was happy. But I knew, deep in my bones, I knew something was catastrophically wrong. So I did something I'm not proud of. I called Jake. We hadn't spoken in over a month. Our relationship had been reduced to awkward text messages and forced politeness at family events.
When he answered, he sounded surprised.
I told him I needed to talk to him about Marcus. There was this long, horrible silence. Then he asked me what Marcus had told me. I said Marcus claimed they'd reconciled and were working on a business deal together. Jake laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was bitter, defeated, almost pitying. He told me to meet him the next day at a cafe in Camden. He said there were things I needed to know, things that Marcus would never tell me. I didn't sleep that night. Marcus snored beside me, peaceful, while I lay there staring at the ceiling, my mind racing through every possible scenario. By the time the sun came up, I'd convinced myself that I was about to discover my husband was having an affair. Somehow that felt like the best-case scenario. I met Jake at the cafe at noon. He looked awful, thinner than I remembered, dark circles under his eyes, his shirt wrinkled like he'd slept in it. When I sat down across from him, he couldn't meet my eyes. He told me everything. 3 years ago, when Jake had his breakdown at my wedding, it wasn't just drunken paranoia. He'd hired a private investigator to look into Marcus's background. He'd found something disturbing. Marcus had been married before. Not just once, but twice. Both marriages had ended in divorce within 2 years, and in both cases, Marcus had walked away with significant settlements. The first wife had accused him of financial manipulation, of slowly isolating her from her family, and then draining their joint accounts before filing for divorce. The second wife had taken out a restraining order, claiming Marcus had engaged in systematic psychological abuse. Jake had evidence. Divorce records, court filings, even screenshots of forum posts from support groups where Marcus's ex-wives had warned other women about him. But by the time Jake found all this, we were already married. He tried to tell me at the reception, tried to stop the wedding, but he was too drunk and too angry, and I thought he was just being controlling. After I cut him off, Jake obsessed over it. He blamed himself for not stopping me, for not protecting me. When Marcus reached out to him 6 months ago, claiming he wanted to reconcile, Jake was suspicious but curious. Marcus suggested they meet for coffee. During that meeting, Marcus made Jake an offer. Marcus told Jake he was planning to divorce me. He said our marriage had run its course, that he'd extracted what he needed from it. But he wanted it to be clean, quiet, and profitable. He knew Jake hated him, knew Jake had evidence of his past, and he was worried Jake would interfere with the divorce settlement. So Marcus proposed a deal. If Jake stayed silent, didn't warn me, didn't reveal Marcus's history to any lawyers or judges, Marcus would give him 30% of whatever settlement he got from me. Jake turned him down flat, told Marcus to go to hell, that he'd never betray his sister like that. But Marcus didn't give up. He started showing up at Jake's work, started sending him messages, started threatening him. Marcus had done his own research on Jake. He knew about Jake's financial troubles after his divorce, knew Jake was barely keeping his business afloat, knew Jake had debts he couldn't pay. Marcus told Jake that if he didn't cooperate, Marcus would make sure Jake lost everything. He'd sue him for slander, drag him through court, bankrupt him completely. Jake was terrified. He was already drowning financially. He couldn't afford a legal battle. So he agreed to meet with Marcus, agreed to stay quiet, agreed to play along. But he couldn't go through with betraying me. He'd been meeting with Marcus to stall him, to buy time while Jake figured out what to do. He'd been documenting everything, recording their meetings, saving their messages, building a case. He told me he was so sorry. He said he should have warned me sooner, but he didn't know how. He was ashamed, scared, trapped. I sat there in that cafe, and I felt like I was watching my life from outside my body. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be my husband. My Marcus. The man who brought me tea in bed every Sunday. The man who cried at our wedding. The man who talked about baby names and future holidays and growing old together. I asked Jake where money had gone. He said he didn't know, but he suspected Marcus had been slowly funneling it into hidden accounts, preparing for the divorce. He said Marcus had done the same thing to his previous wives, convinced them to put their savings into investments that only he controlled, then cleaned them out when he filed. I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip the table over, smash every window in that cafe, burn the whole bloody world down. But instead, I just sat there, numb, while Jake pushed a USB drive across the table. He said it contained everything. Recordings, messages, documents. Evidence. I took the USB drive.
I thanked Jake.
I hugged him for the first time in 3 years, and he started crying into my shoulder, apologizing over and over. I told him it wasn't his fault. I told him I loved him. I told him I was going to make this right. But as I walked out of that cafe into the bright afternoon sunlight, I had no idea how. I just discovered that my entire marriage was a lie, that the man I loved was a con artist, and that I'd been his mark from the very beginning. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Marcus. Hey love, running late. Don't wait up for dinner. Working on our surprise. Love you. That's when something inside me broke. Not broke sad. Broke sharp. Broke dangerous. I wasn't going to let him do this. I wasn't going to be another victim in Marcus's collection. I was going to destroy him. I went home and plugged in Jake's USB drive. What I found made my stomach turn. Hours of recordings. Marcus talking casually about his system. How he targeted women who were financially stable but emotionally vulnerable. How he love-bombed them, isolated them from anyone who might question him, then slowly took control of their finances. How he'd done this successfully twice before and was perfecting his method with me. In one recording, Marcus actually laughed about how I defended him against Jake at our wedding. He called me eager to please and tragically trusting. There were messages between Marcus and someone named Paul, apparently his mate from university, who helped him set up shell companies and offshore accounts. They discussed how much they thought they could extract from me before filing for divorce. Marcus estimated between 80 and 100,000 pounds, plus potential alimony if he played it right. There were even draft divorce papers. Already written. Already prepared. He was planning to serve them to me in 3 months, right after our 8th anniversary. He'd written notes in the margins about how to maximize the settlement, how to claim I'd been emotionally abusive or financially controlling, how to paint himself as the victim. I sat there in our living room, surrounded by our life together. Photos from our holidays, furniture we'd chosen together, wedding gifts from friends, and I realized none of it had ever been real. Not for him. I'd been living in a beautiful lie for 6 years while he calculated exactly how much I was worth. The rage that filled me was unlike anything I'd ever felt. It was cold, focused, surgical. I wasn't going to cry or beg or fall apart. I was going to beat him at his own game. I called a lawyer that night. Not just any lawyer, the best divorce lawyer in London. A woman named Diane who had a reputation for absolutely destroying manipulative spouses in court. I sent her everything Jake had given me. She called me back within an hour and said this was the most clear-cut case of financial abuse and fraud she'd seen in 15 years. She said we could not only protect my remaining assets, but potentially go after everything Marcus had taken from his previous wives. Then I did something brilliant. I pretended nothing had changed. Marcus came home that night and I smiled at him. I kissed him. I asked him about his day. I played the loving, trusting wife while I secretly photographed every document in his home office, copied every file from his laptop, accessed every account I could find. Diane had told me to gather everything before he knew I was onto him, to build an airtight case before he could hide or destroy evidence. For 2 weeks, I lived this double life. During the day, I met with Diane and a forensic accountant she'd brought in. We traced every penny Marcus had taken, found the shell companies, identified the offshore accounts. We discovered he'd stolen nearly £70,000 from me, and we found assets from his previous marriages that he'd hidden and never disclosed. The forensic accountant estimated Marcus's actual net worth at over £300,000, money he'd stolen from 3 different women and concealed through increasingly elaborate schemes. At night, I came home to Marcus and acted normal. We watched Netflix together. We had sex. We planned our anniversary trip. And the whole time, I was memorizing his passwords, documenting his movements, recording our conversations about finances. The hardest part was not showing my hand. There were moments when he'd say something sweet, something that would have melted me before, and I had to remind myself that it was all performance. He was performing for me the same way I was now performing for him. We were 2 actors in a play, except I knew the script, and he thought he was improvising. Jake helped too. He kept meeting with Marcus, kept up the pretense of their arrangement. Marcus trusted Jake's silence because he bought it with threats. What Marcus didn't know was that every meeting was being recorded, every conversation documented. Then came the day Diane said we were ready. She'd filed the divorce papers, frozen all our joint accounts, and prepared an emergency court order to prevent Marcus from accessing or transferring any assets. She'd coordinated with the police to have him investigated for fraud. Everything was in place. I served him the papers on our 8th anniversary. We were supposed to go to Paris that weekend. I'd even helped him book the hotel, picked out restaurants, acted excited. That morning, he brought me breakfast in bed, croissants from my favorite bakery, coffee exactly how I liked it, fresh flowers. He kissed my forehead and told me he'd never been happier. I waited until he sat down. Then I pulled the envelope from under my pillow and slid it across to him. His face when he opened it will stay with me forever. Confusion first, then recognition, then panic, then this horrible trapped animal fear. He looked at me like he'd never seen me before. I told him I knew everything. I listed it all calmly. The previous marriages, the stolen money, the shell companies, the planned divorce, the deal with Jake. All of it. I told him I'd been documenting his fraud for 2 weeks. I told him Diane had already frozen the accounts and that the police would be knocking on our door within the hour to question him about financial crimes. He tried to lie.
Of course he tried to lie.
He said it was all a misunderstanding, that Jake had twisted everything, that the money was still there in investments. But his voice was shaking. His hands were trembling. He knew he'd been caught. Then he got angry. He called me horrible things. He said I was vindictive, that I'd ruin him, that I was just like his ex-wives, bitter and vengeful. He actually had the audacity to play the victim, to claim he'd loved me and I was destroying him over nothing. I stood up, looked him in the eye, and told him something I'd been rehearsing for days. I said, "You spent 6 years of my life calculating exactly how much I was worth to you. You turned my love into a transaction. But you made one critical mistake, Marcus. You assumed I'd stay trusting and stupid. You forgot that pain makes people smart and betrayal makes them ruthless. And now you're about to learn exactly how much you underestimated me." The police arrived 20 minutes later. They didn't arrest him that day, but they took him in for questioning. Diane had done her job perfectly. Within a week, Marcus's assets were seized. The investigation expanded to include his previous victims. His mate Paul, the one who'd helped set up the shell companies, turned on him immediately to save himself. The divorce was brutal and public. Diane made sure of that. She wanted other women to know what Marcus had done, to warn them. The case made the local news. Marcus's face was plastered across websites with headlines like "Serial Grifter Targeted Wives for Financial Gain." His first 2 ex-wives came forward with their own stories. There was even talk of criminal charges. In the end, I got everything. Not just my money back, but a significant portion of everything Marcus had stolen from everyone. The court ordered him to pay restitution, compensation, and legal fees. He lost his job, his reputation, everything. Last I heard, he'd moved back in with his mom in Sheffield and was working retail while fighting bankruptcy. Jake and I rebuilt our relationship. He'd been carrying so much guilt, and I'd been carrying so much misplaced trust. We learned to talk to each other honestly, to trust each other's instincts. Mom and Emma supported me through every horrible moment of the divorce. Our family healed, stronger than before. But here's the thing they don't tell you about revenge, about winning, about justice. It doesn't make you feel better. Not really. I got my money back. I destroyed the man who tried to destroy me. I protected future women from falling into his trap. But I still lost 6 years of my life to a lie. I still remember what it felt like to love him, to trust him, to imagine a future with him. Those feelings were real, even if he was fake. And knowing that I was capable of that kind of love, and that someone used it against me so calculatedly, that knowledge changed me. I'm more careful now, more guarded. I look at people differently. When someone is kind to me, I wonder what they want. When someone loves me, I wonder when they'll show their true colors. I know that's not fair, that not everyone is Marcus, but once you've been betrayed that completely, it rewires your brain. Sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night with my heart racing, reaching for a phone that isn't there, checking for messages from a brother and a husband who are plotting against me. Then I remember it's over. I'm safe. I won. But winning feels lonelier than I expected. I checked my husband's phone and found my brother's name. What I discovered didn't just end my marriage. It ended my ability to trust blindly, to love naively, to believe that the people closest to you can't hurt you the worst. And maybe that's the real scar that remains. Not the money he stole, but the innocence he killed. The part of me that believed in happily ever after died the moment I saw that name light up the screen. And I'm still learning how to live without it. Every story leaves a mark. If this one touched you, let the telling tree grow by your like and subscribe.